So we are coming to our final presentation of this conference before we head into the panel, and I can promise you, of course, as always, the saying, last but not least, is also true in this case. Holding a Master's of Science degree in Statistics, Niklas Klein is an expert on damage prediction and detection before and after natural catastrophes and works as a data scientist at Munich Re. He's being joined today by Thomas Zerweg, who is an expert on geospatial solutions also at Munich Re, and I'm very happy that they are here on applied machine learning for geo-risk management in the insurance industry. Welcome, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome from our side, and if you look at us, you probably can already guess from the age who is who. So of course the smart young guy here is the data scientist, and I'm the geographer from the Geospatial Solutions department. Munich Re, what kind of business is this? I don't know how many of you have ever heard the name or know what we do. It's a reinsurance company, one of the largest in the world, and to put it very simple, we insure insurance companies. So it's always about a lot of single risks, a lot of data, hundreds of thousands of residential buildings, for instance, that we get a certain share of from the primary insurance company. The group is also including a primary insurer, Ergo, well known in Germany at least, and of course some asset management. So natural catastrophes, therefore, of course, play an important role for us. And here we have some numbers from last year from our Munich Re NatCat service. You see that this is a substantial number which we have in terms of losses and also in terms of insured losses. And last year was not an expensive year, it was an average year, or probably even below average. 2017, for instance, the numbers were much higher, with especially because of the three hurricanes, Harvey, Irma, and Maria, wildfires in California, and an earthquake in Mexico, so that was really expensive. And now, if you were wondering, okay, geo and insurance, how does that go together? Well, we have locations, we have natural catastrophes, we need to bring them together somehow, and that's where the geo, where the spatial comes in. And this is really a long history, therefore, that the geospatial solutions or the geospatial analytics part has been or played an important role within the company. So it really started with paper maps, and now it's more about any kind of online tools. And to step quickly through a few use cases, through a few business cases where this plays a major role. So for instance, in terms of risk assessment, where you try to bring together your exposure, your portfolio with the, in that case, earthquake hazard. You want to get a quick estimation or a first estimation what the hazard is. Then real-time monitoring would be another use case, or for instance, post-loss estimation. So after an event happened, to get a quick estimation about the losses, and this is something that will Niklas give you further insight and a further step in a few minutes. So finally, what do we do as a geospatial analytics team? We more or less try to provide all things geospatial, so to say. So we try to provide tools, solutions, services, and of course we handle data. And on the other side, we also try to kind of coordinate activities within the company. We try to do some kind of consulting, I would say, and business analysis. And this is where it comes together with the department where Niklas is from, with the artificial intelligence department, bringing those two domains together to go a step further. And with that, I hand over to Niklas to show you something about data science.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, for introducing Munich Re. My name is Niklas. I'm a member of the AI team of Munich Re, and you can think of our department as some sort of supportive role or training role for the other business units. So we collaborate with other business units to work on projects, we train them, also we demystify AI. Right-hand side, you can see a lot of buzzwords, but we have already learned yesterday, as long as it's on PowerPoint, it's okay to use these buzzwords. I'm going to present you one of our, I would say, lighthouse projects, which is really running in production as a live service. So we're going beyond the PowerPoint buzzwordiness here. And in order to explain the need and necessity for this product, think of a hurricane, a natural catastrophe, and its aftermath. The image that can be seen here is from Mexico Beach, which is, by the way, located in Florida, not in Mexico. And the aftermath of Hurricane Michael in 2018. So for the primary insurer, this means a vast quantity, a huge amount of claims incoming hours after or days after the hurricane, and it's really hard for the primary insurance company to take care of that. And the main objective of insurance, one of the main objectives, is customer satisfaction, which can be translated into a quick response time. So please remember that image, because in a couple of minutes we're going to see that building from a different angle. And this is where the project that we created over the last couple of years kicks in, to support the primary insurance to steer this claims process after the natural catastrophes. And it is called Remote Industries, and it comes with different components. The first component, which we will look more into on the upcoming slides, is a loss prediction model. So the purpose of that model is really to give predictions on a property base, so for each individual building, how likely the case of a loss is, and how high the loss will be for that particular building. This model gives updated predictions on a daily basis, but we're looking into it in more detail on the next slide. The second component, which is also using machine learning, is post-catastrophe. This is where I spend most of the time within the project. So here we're using computer vision methods to assess the damages, the real damages, after the natural catastrophe, and support the loss triage of the primary insurance companies. We have other components in our project that do not necessarily use machine learning, but just to mention them quickly, we offer a post-loss inspection tool to see whether the property has been repaired or not, and also a visual inspection tool that can be used by the loss adjuster. These are the people that inspect the buildings and say, okay, there we have this and that sort of damage, and that will be the payout. And here the loss adjuster can directly connect with the insured person in case of a remote inspection, if that's possible, which is not always the case. So coming to the first model that I have just mentioned, the damage prediction model, the data sources which are being used to predict whether a property will suffer from damage or not are quite divergent. So we use weather data from different resources which are being updated on a day-to-day basis. So the predictions of this model might change a lot when the hurricane is approaching and before making landfall. In addition to that, we use different property data such as the building type, the roof age, and so on and so forth. And that's actually coming what you said earlier in your presentation, that's exactly the tricky part here, to align all these components, in particular because this is running in a live system. So it's not that you have these data sets stored on your hard drive and then you, I don't know, do some pre-processing and build your model. It must be done all live, like as a streaming service. That's really difficult. And then you can see on the imagery on top different zoom levels for the latest major hurricane, Dorian, which obliterated the Bahamas, the predictions of the model one day before the hurricane made landfall. Now for the second component, the post catastrophe estimation model, we use high resolution aerial imaging. Speaking of 5 centimeter resolution, which is far beyond the standard satellite resolution, you might ask yourself where we obtain this data from. It's actually from airplanes, and there are 2 scenarios. The first scenario is that the natural catastrophe occurs in the United States. Then there's a consortium called GIC, which we have partnered with. They're flying over these areas hours after the hurricane devastates the landscapes, and we are provided with the imagery within hours. And the second case is, as it was in the Bahamas, this image is from the Bahamas, from August last year, where we have to fly ourselves because it's out of the area that is covered by the GIC. And we were, by the way, the only ones that were allowed to fly over the Bahamas right after the Hurricane Dorian. Zooming to the bottom right corner, that's actually the image that we have seen a couple of minutes ago. The roof of the building that was completely ripped apart and thrown on the side. So these are actually on a very high level, the different damage classes that we're trying to access with our damage prediction model based on the aerial imagery. So in the top row, you can see different classes assessing different types of roof damage. We have no damage, we have top layer damage. Here you can think of missing shingles on the first layer of the roof. Then we have a class for all layers. Then whether we have structural damage or whether the building is literally completely gone. We are also trying to find classes that are not directly associated with the roof, like tree fallen on roof, or on the bottom right, whether there are tarps on the roof. These are also indicators for potential damages that can occur on the roof. And how do we do that? We actually do that by semantic segmentation. The great advantage is that these images usually speak for themselves. It's also quite advantageous when you want to show that to the management, and you gain a better level of trust for your model when you run compared to standard classification models. Let's take a look at a couple of these examples. So, for instance, on the top center, you see a severely damaged building, and these are really predictions on our test data set that we annotated ourselves with a lot of expert and domain knowledge. That's really a vital ingredient here. So thinking of myself, just to give you some insight on the process as a data scientist, I would have never been able to create the annotations for that without the expert knowledge from the loss adjusters, for instance. And the model, coming back to that image here, it's really able to nicely distinguish between the surroundings, where we observe a lot of debris, and the collapsed part of the roof. Looking at another example in the bottom center, here the model is really nicely able to distinguish between trees that are actually falling on the roof and lying next to it. It can also nicely distinguish between trees that are just hanging over the roof and really lying on the roof. The contextual information of the image is really important to model these relationships. One last example, maybe on the bottom right, you see a building that's completely gone. And here our model is also quite nicely able, in most of the cases, these are probably the most trickiest examples, to model the building footprint of the former building, which is now gone. Okay, this is Elbow Cape from the Bahamas. Here we run our systems the last times live in August last year, and you can see in particular on the left-hand side the predictions of our models, which were available to our clients roughly 2 or 3 days after the hurricane devastated the Bahamas. And just to give you a feeling how long it usually takes for the primary insurance company to handle these claims. Right now, the primary insurance companies are still working on the clients, and we're speaking of 6 months after the hurricane. So it's really taking almost 1 year or maybe more, depending on the size and the degree of devastation of the hurricane. It's just the same image with a different map layer. You can also zoom in to highlight our predictions. And this is another zoom level. This is really the interface that the client has, where he can upload his portfolio data and then access the predictions for each building in his portfolio. You can obviously also make quite detailed predictions for the damaged properties based on our post-catastrophe models, the image models, to access the total number of losses based on that hurricane. Yeah, and that's basically it. Thanks for your patience and feel free to ask questions.
Thank you very much, Thomas Serberg and Niklas Klein. I'll go directly into questions. There's one here. Yeah.
Thank you. Great talk. You say that your post-catastrophe image is a resolution of 5 centimeter pixels.
Yeah.
You don't have 5 centimeters in the before image, I'm assuming. So how do you? So if you do,
we do. Yeah. So like I said earlier, there are two scenarios. The first scenario is that the hurricane is within the United States. So the GIC, this consortium, provides the 5 centimeter resolution imagery also before the catastrophe. And in the case of the Bahamas, we have decided to fly before the hurricane makes landfall. So obviously a quick response in that case is necessary, and also after the catastrophe. So we have both cases.
Okay. Thank you. At the back, yes?
Hi, thanks for the nice talk. You were focusing now a lot on hurricanes, which have the advantage that you see the damage right from the outside and best at the roof level. But how do you approach damage assessment of caused by earthquakes?
So this project in its current state is mainly intended, or actually only intended, to serve as a toolkit for hurricanes. We're currently looking into additional use cases like wildfire, but also earthquakes, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the interesting talk. I'm just wondering if you can make predictions. Can your results flow into, for example, building codes against or for better preparation to storms, whatever?
Yeah, so that's also the idea of this first ingredient of the product, the model that tries to estimate the loss probability for each individual property, to give the primary insurance companies also the option to contact the insured person, to tell them to prepare for the hurricane, maybe with some reinforcements for their buildings to avoid damage. So that's the objective of the first model. Also, there's a huge scarcity with respect to the loss adjusters, the people that go to inspect the buildings after the catastrophe, so they can prepare and plan in advance how or where to send their loss adjusters to.
So one short question to your aerial data: is it only RGB, or do you have multispectral data?
So the imagery is taken by airplanes, so we do not have access to all the channels that you would probably get from a satellite, but we do have both. We have near infrared and also height data. Yeah.
Yeah, here.
I have a slightly different question. I think the climate change is really posing sort of like an existential threat to insurance industry. Do you perceive that so, or can your AI department actually help with the climate risk and estimation side?
Not right now. I think that might be a question for you rather to answer.
I'm not sure, but generally speaking, of course, climate change has an impact on the estimations and models for the future and how to estimate what's coming up. But as an insurance company, you always need a risk, because if there's no risk, no one will buy an insurance. So therefore, it's more a question of how to handle that risk and how to price it at the end.
Do we have another direct question? Otherwise, we'll just go into the discussion, and then we can carry on anyway. Okay, thank you so much. I would like to ask you to take your first seats.